we left off last time at the end of muscle physiology, we were talking about some interesting, some unique features or properties of cardiac muscle. Okay, we looked at smooth muscle last time, and so we talked about some of the properties of smooth muscle. And lastly, the last type of muscle is cardiac muscle. And here are some of the ways that cardiac muscle differs from skeletal muscle and differs from smooth muscle, or ways that they are the same. So first of all, cardiac muscle is striated, just like skeletal muscle, meaning that it has sarcomeres. And you should know by now a sarcomere is just the parallel organization of the filaments, the thin and thick filaments. Although smooth muscle does have those thin and thick filaments, they're not arranged in sarcomeres, and so we don't see the striations in that type of muscle. Also, we have troponin and tropomyosin regulation with cardiac muscle. This is something we also have with skeletal muscle, and we did not see with smooth muscle, right? Meaning that troponin interacts with calcium, and then tropomyosin moves on and off of those binding sites, and that's how muscle contraction is regulated in this type of muscle. We have the presence of gap junctions. What other type of muscle do we see gap junctions in? Anyone remembers? What other type of muscle do we see gap junctions in?
Is it like our epithelial tissue?
So it's in epithelia. Yep, we have gap junctions in epithelia. That's correct. Any other
Single unit smooth muscle.
Single unit smooth muscle. So we also have it in single unit smooth muscle, and remember, not in multi-unit, right? Pacemaker ability. So cardiac muscles have the ability to spontaneously depolarize the threshold, meaning that in the absence of any neuronal input or innervation, cardiac muscle can be excited, can depolarize, can fire natural potential. And that's a very unique property to cardiac muscle. Without that feature, the heart would not be able to sustain itself on its own and to beat on its own, essentially. It's innervated by the autonomic nervous system, right? So there's dual innervation here. Both the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division have influence on the heart rate, on contractility, and other features that we'll look at. So the autonomic nervous system is the innervation here. Calcium, so we also saw this same feature with smooth muscle. The source for calcium is not only from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, but also from the external environment. So the extracellular fluid also provides calcium for muscle contraction, right? So you want to bear that in mind. Cardiac and smooth muscle get their calcium for muscle contraction from outside in the ECF, as well as from the SR or the ER. The action potentials last as long as tension. And this is something we saw before. The action potential, because of the way it is organized, because of the refractory period, there's not an opportunity for summation here, all right? We know that at the end of depolarization, right, we fire an action potential here, and then the membrane begins to repolarize, and during that time, we cannot fire another action potential. So due to this extensive refractory period, there's no summation seen with cardiac muscle. So where do we see summation? So you can remember, what did we say was one area that we did see summation? So graded potentials, right? Graded potentials have the ability to sum, but not action potentials, and especially not in the cardiac muscle. All right, another nice table for your studying. Again, I urge you to try to erase the content of the table, just leave the headings and that first column, which is property, and try to fill this in on your understanding. All right, for example, we know that single unit smooth muscle shares some features with cardiac muscle, and that's going to be the presence of gap junctions as well as pacemaker potential. Right, and so on and so forth. We know that hormonal input is not involved in the skeletal muscle, but it is seen in smooth and cardiac muscle. So try to recreate this table or a similar table. Another good example, or another good study tool rather, is a Venn diagram. If you create a Venn diagram, you can put skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and then areas of overlap you can put into those different parts of the Venn diagram. So that's another interesting way to study these features. So the first objective of the cardiovascular system is to understand the general, to have a general understanding, rather, of the components that make up this system. So basically, we're talking about the anatomy, we're talking about the structure. What does the heart look like? What are the components of the cardiovascular system? What is the movement happening of blood, and so on and so forth, the chambers, the valves, and that's what we're going to pretty much study today. And next time, we'll get into the electrical activity. So the cardiovascular system is one of the most important systems in the body. It's made of the heart, which is a muscular organ. It's made of the vessels that are attached to the heart, as well as the blood that circulates all throughout the body. These are the main components of the CVS. The function of the CVS, mainly for transport. It's the most important function of the heart, of the blood vessels, of the blood, moving things around. Think about it as a highway system or network, and its most important function is transport. What are we transporting? Right? We're transporting things like oxygen, nutrients to the cells. Like, this is very important for cells to generate ATP and to do their other cellular work. We're also removing waste. So we remove waste products, like the byproducts of breakdown, or the breakdown products of processes, cellular processes. We remove other toxins from the liver and kidney, try to flush them out of the body using the blood. And we also transport useful chemicals, such as hormones, other clotting factors. We transport cells in the case of an immune response. If you have an injury somewhere in your body, the blood actually rushes to that area, bringing clotting factors, bringing immune cells to help treat that injury or to get rid of that bacteria or pathogen. Okay, so the main function of the CVS is to move things around. Okay. Let's look at the structure of the heart a little bit. So the heart is this muscular organ. It's this muscular, I like to think of it as a tube. It's a modified blood vessel if you look at the structure. So think about a blood vessel that becomes highly folded on itself to where the internal structure forms these chambers, and then the outer muscular wall is actually contracting to move blood through the chambers. We also have these important vessels attached to the heart, right? Some vessels are bringing blood in, some vessels are taking blood away. So these are arteries or veins, depending on whether the blood that they contain is oxygenated or deoxygenated. Now, we have 4 chambers in the heart, right? 2 upper chambers, they're right here. So they have a smoother wall, they're usually smaller, and they have less of a muscular wall than the ventricles do. We also have 2 lower chambers, which are bigger. They have a thicker, more muscular wall, and they're not as smooth in terms of the internal surface of the chamber. They have what we call the papillary muscles and the tendinous cords. We're going to talk about those structures. But the main takeaway point is the atria have a very smooth wall inside. If you look at an actual cadaver heart, you'll be able to differentiate the atria just by seeing this very smooth surface, whereas the ventricles have a thicker and more rigid structure of the wall. Okay, we also have valves in the heart, and the function of valves, we'll talk about the exact location of them in a little bit, but their function is to prevent backflow of blood, right? We have blood moving in one direction in the body. We do not want blood flowing in the opposite direction. We do not want blood flowing back where it just came from. So blood leaving the atria moves down into the ventricle, and to prevent that backflow of blood, we have the valve here, okay? We have 4 of them. We have 2 that are separating atria from ventricles, and then we have 2 that are separating the ventricles from the external vessel that's leaving this chamber, right? And so this is pretty much the structure of your heart. Let's talk about the vessels and their function. So we have major vessels that are leaving the heart. Some I just pointed out, such as the aorta, the subclavian arteries are pretty major vessels, and they're taking fresh oxygenated blood that has just come from the heart, goes into the left side of the heart, and is now pumped out into arteries. All right? And so arteries are the largest branching vessels that are taking blood away from the heart. They're usually very high pressure because of that force, that contractile force that's leaving the heart. And obviously they have lots of oxygenated blood in their walls. This blood is oxygen. Arterioles are a little bit smaller. They are branching just like arteries, but then they have a high resistance. And that high resistance means that they have a smaller lumen, all right? So they're not as wide or as thick as those larger elastic arteries, but they have a high resistance because of their smaller lumen, and that helps to maintain pressure to get that blood to go everywhere it needs to go, that high resistance. Finally, we get to the very smallest vessels, which are capillaries. And this is a very important location of exchange of nutrients and waste between the blood, between the vessels, and the tissues. So capillaries are very tiny vessels, and they intermingle or wrap around the tissues. And so there's a very easy diffusion of oxygen into the cells, into the tissues, but then also those waste products we talked about back into the blood to be transported to the heart or to the lungs to be removed from the body in the case of carbon dioxide, or to the liver or to the kidneys to be expelled. Right? So that's our capillaries. Then there are venules, and venules are smaller veins, similar to arterioles. Nothing fancy about them. Their lumen is smaller, but then they have to move against resistance, and so they typically have valves in them. And again, that's to prevent the backflow. Venules and veins have to return blood against gravity, usually. If you look at veins in the lower limbs, they have to work against gravity, so having valves is very important. And our last vessel here are veins, which are the largest vessels that are bringing deoxygenated blood back to the heart, to be pumped to the lungs to do the oxygen. So basically, if you look at the entire system, blood only moves through the heart to be pumped. All we need is that contractile force to send it around the body. And that's the whole purpose of the heart. It's just a pump. Right? So it's pumping this blood to go all the way throughout the body. It brings it back, pumps it through the lungs to get oxygenated once again, brings it back, pumps it through the body once again. So it's really just a tool. It's just facilitating transport of nutrients and oxygen. And just to remind ourselves, this is a closed system. So this is not open to the body like the GI system where you can eat something and it ends up in your gastrointestinal tract. This is a closed system. Nothing can enter a blood vessel. It doesn't open to the outside. There's no orifice that leads into blood vessels. Things have to be either diffused across the wall or injected, or in the case of IV or whatever, it has to be something foreign that is introduced to that vessel. Let's look at blood composition. So first of all, blood is divided into mainly plasma and then cells. So half of blood, about half, is plasma. That's the fluid, non-cellular part of the blood. The other half are basically cells and non-cellular components. All right? So the cells on the bottom half, in the case of this image, are basically of two types. Right? We have leukocytes, which is a very small amount of blood, of the total blood. And then we also have erythrocytes, which are our red blood cells, and these are much more amount or much higher concentration in blood. Right? So half of blood is plasma, which is the fluid, liquid part of blood. The other half is cells. Of that cells, majority of the cells are red blood cells, which we call erythrocytes. And then a smaller component of those cells are leukocytes, which we call white blood cells. Okay, and then there's also platelets present in that cellular component as well. So the platelets are basically cell fragments. So they're not cells. They're just these components, these non-cellular components that are important in clotting the blood and other functions like that. So this is how blood is made up essentially, right? Cells and then that liquid part.